So is it okay for a Christian to live in fear? Is it okay for a Christian to have fear of any kind? We see in the Bible so much that we're supposed to have no fear, to not fear, to be okay and just live in a state of not being afraid. We see the command so many times. So is that okay? That's what we are going to talk about in today's video. So stay tuned, buckle up, because here we go. And don't forget to give this video a like, subscribe to our channel, share it with friends, and let us know what you think about your opinion about fear in the comments below. So let's get started. So we're talking about fear today. And this is one of those things that I think as Christians we understand on so many levels, and we know intellectually that we're really not supposed to be afraid, right? But at the same time, fear is a natural emotion. And honestly, from a scientific standpoint, fear is supposed to be there. We're supposed to have some kind of fear because in a lot of ways, fear from a more of a primal instinct sort of fashion, fear is supposed to be there. We're supposed to. Fear is what keeps us alive, right? Now that may not necessarily be always the case, but fear of getting hit by a car keeps us looking both ways when we cross the street. Fear that we're not going to be able to pay our bills is what keeps us employed and, from losing our minds and just quitting our jobs when we get frustrated. Fear of getting in trouble sometimes, right? Fear of getting a ticket. Fear of, getting a speeding ticket. Fear of getting caught stealing. Fear of any of those kinds of things generally keeps us honest and keeps us sometimes as law-abiding citizens. Fear is a powerful, powerful motivator, and it's used in business all over the place. Think how many commercials are designed around fear and making sure that you are afraid of something, therefore you'll make a purchase to eliminate the fear, right? Fear is a powerful motivator. And so it's just part of who we are as human beings to be afraid. And in some cases, it's not a bad thing. Like I said, it keeps us from getting hit by a car because I'm afraid I'm going to get hit by a car. So I look both ways and I make sure that I'm not being reckless. When it comes to parents, right? We're afraid that our children are going to get hurt. And in many cases, we make sure that we do things to ensure of their safety. And those things are generally pretty good. So then why is it in the Bible we read so often and so many times, do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Well, wait a minute. How am I supposed to not be afraid when there's legitimately things I'm supposed to be afraid of? But at the same time, do what Scripture says and live not afraid. Seems like maybe it's a little bit of a contradiction. Well, maybe. So let me explain. So the passage I want to look at, if you have a chance, you need to go there, is the very first chapter in Joshua. So we have creation, we have the promise of Abraham, we have all the way through Joseph, and then we come to Egypt and Moses leads the people of Israel out of Egypt and on their way to the promised land. We have the 40 years of wandering in the desert to the point where Moses brings them to the edge of the promised land, and he is not to see that promise fulfilled. That promise is going to be handed off to his second in command, Joshua. And Joshua is the one that's going to take the nation of Israel into the promised land. They're going to cross the Jordan River and they're going to make it into the promised land. And what God reminds Joshua in chapter 1 is, do not be afraid. I am with you wherever you go. Don't be afraid. Hold on to the commandments. Hold on to everything that you know about me. Hold on to everything that you've learned, because you have no reason to be afraid. You're going to move forward and you're going to do it in faith. And what's interesting is Joshua, his very first command is to take the people and take them from one side of the Jordan to the other side of the Jordan. But he does it at flood stage. So the Jordan River is this interesting thing. Is in some places it's very small. In other places it's massive and treacherous. And every year when the ice and snow melt in the mountains, it flows down and creates the river at flood stage and sort of floods the banks. And it makes it even more difficult. And it's a terrible time to be anywhere trying to cross the Jordan River. So God takes the nation of Israel, 1 million people, and takes them to the edge of the river and says, okay, now you're going to cross. At the worst possible time, in the worst possible season, at the worst possible moment, you're going to cross right now. But to do that, you need to actually step into the water. And it's this fascinating story where Joshua has to lead his people, and the priests have to actually get to the edge of the water, put their toes in the water, and then God stops the water flowing all the way up in a town called Adam, and then it dries out. And the water just keeps flowing down. It's held up so that 1 million people can cross over on dry land. But in that moment, it didn't make any sense. Like, it was like the most ridiculous thing you could possibly do. It would make way more sense to wait it out and cross at a time that the river would be less treacherous, less dangerous, less of a chance. So just wait a second. And so, but he does, right? And in that moment, God reminds Joshua, do not be afraid, do not be afraid, do not be afraid. And that's where I think the lesson is in fear. Because I think there are times in our lives when we should be afraid. Because fear keeps our wits about us. It dials in our senses. It does something to us that says, hey, I need to pay attention. But that doesn't mean I stop. And that doesn't mean I turn back. And that doesn't mean I do it reluctantly. But it means I do it with a certain sense of awareness and a certain wit about myself that I know that I need to pay attention. And that's exactly what Joshua was doing in this moment. He was paying attention, doing exactly what God asked him to do, but doing it in such a way where he was paying attention. Because sometimes fear, as much as it's a natural emotion, fear can also lie to us. Our emotions are not always right. If anybody ever tells you that you're, just to live by your emotions, you're lying to yourself, because sometimes our emotions lie to us and we get them wrong. Because frankly, we just think that I should be afraid. So for example, I don't love heights. Okay, I would say that I am afraid of heights. I don't like going up into high places. And when we drive and when we travel and I have to go over massive bridges, it is like tunnel vision. You keep your eyes forward and everyone's like, oh, look how pretty that looks. And I'm like, nope, I have to just drive. My legs will get all weird and queasy and I'll get super weak and I'll get short breath and I just won't. It's like, nope, you gotta just drive. Now, it doesn't mean I don't do it, but that's my emotions are playing tricks on me. It's telling me that I have a reason to be afraid. Now, intellectually, I know I have no reason, which is why I just keep driving forward. But our emotions do that. It'll tell us that, oh, I need to be afraid of this thing. I need to be afraid of the possibility of this happening. I need to be afraid that this is going to, occur in this way, or something's going to happen, or whatever. And we tell ourselves to be afraid, and then we get anxious, and then we get paralyzed, and then we just perpetuate the fear over and over and over again, because my brain said don't do this, so then I didn't do it. So now I'm even more afraid of it than I was before. So the next time I come to that moment, I'm going to be even more afraid, because I would remind myself that I should be afraid, even though you shouldn't be afraid at all. That's how this rolls. And that's when your emotions are lying to you. And so what God is reminding us is saying, listen, don't let your emotions lie to you. Don't be afraid when there's no reason to be afraid, because I'm with you and you can keep moving forward. That doesn't mean that the emotion goes away. What it means is that what I know to be true supersedes what my emotions think is true. And so truth overcomes the emotion of the moment. And I had it described to me this way one time. And sometimes you just have to let your emotions sort of wash over you like a wave without knocking you off your feet. And the only way it doesn't knock you off your feet is that if you're aware that it's there and that it's coming and that you're prepped and ready to go for it. And what God is reminding us is that we need to be absolutely 100% ready for when fear strikes up and causes us to be way more alert. We can be alert. And we can know what's going on around us, but we don't stop moving forward. We just keep going because we know that standing right next to us is Him who gives us the strength to keep moving forward. Because He told us to not be afraid. Because the things that God asks us to step into are often some of the most nonsensical, fear-producing moments possible. Because just like with Joshua, when crossing the Jordan made no sense whatsoever, there are so many times that God is going to ask you to do something that honestly probably doesn't make any sense. But that's those moments when He's with us the most, because that's when He gets to show up. That's when He gets to do something that just doesn't even make any sense, like stopping water. God doesn't have to stop the water. He could have told them to just go at a different time. But nope, He says, we're going to do this differently. You're going to go when it doesn't make any sense so I can do something that doesn't make any sense. And that's when it gets super, super cool. So that's the goal here, is to go after it, face the fear. And then we don't have a reason to be afraid. We can keep going. We can keep moving forward in that fear and let God do His thing, let God work. So that's the lesson for today, is to not avoid the fear, step into the fear and watch what God can do. Oh. So like I said, if you love this video and you like what we're doing and you like all the devotions and you like all the stuff that we've included with this, please give the video a like. Subscribe to the channel, make a comment about your experience. Would love to hear about how you've conquered fear and what it's done for you, maybe a way that God has shown up. And as always, share it with your friends. We would love to keep spreading this as far and as wide as we can get, and we'll see you next time.